Hey everybody, I'm Greg Soul and I'm here with another CI Cube demo. Today I'm going to be talking about choosing hosts in Ascender or Ansible. It actually kind of works the same in both of them, and they actually kind of work in tandem. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that. But first, I'm going to slide deck you. So let's start by talking about the difference between inventories and hosts, right? So inventories, if you're doing it on the CLI, it's going to be kind of a file base that can either be an INI format or in YAML, right? And so it's really just an inventory is a big list of all the hosts I could potentially operate against. Now you can have multiple inventories, right? It doesn't mean you have to have one giganto inventory. You can actually maintain multiple. And I think most people probably do in their environments. I know I do. So if it is CLI Ansible, you're going to be doing it file-based. If you're using Ascender, it's actually stored in the database. And to be perfectly honest, it's easier in Ascender, the way it breaks everything out, and we'll take a look at that here in a little bit. But again, all of the hosts I could potentially operate in this job, right, in this automation. So there also is a host section inside of your playbook, right? It's at the very top, and really what you're doing is you're designating a subset of hosts you're going to operate against inside that inventory, right? So inventory, big master list, host section in a playbook. I'm narrowing down which individual host I'm actually going to operate against. Let's talk a little bit more about that host section itself. So it can be a comma separated list of hosts, right? You can put all of them in there. But imagine you have 100 hosts. Do you actually want to put all 100 of them in the list? You probably don't. And so inventories in Ansible have this concept called groups. So it makes it easier to group things together for multiple reasons. And one of those specific reasons is in that host section, I can actually just put a group name. Instead of all 100 of those hosts, I can put one group name. That also means if I add a host to that group or I remove one, if I rerun the automation, it's still going to run against that group, right? I don't have to actually go in and edit my playbook host section, right? So it makes it very easy there. As well as the group section can actually maintain variables specific for that group, right? So you could think of it as all of my Cisco iOS devices I put in there, and I put the variable information in that group for connection information. Or it could be I have a web application and I want to group all the servers associated with that web application together, right? You kind of get the idea. Now the host section, again, I said you could put comma separated list of hosts or groups because you can actually mix and match. So you can have groups and hosts kind of comma separated in there. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility. So groups, again, can represent one host or 1,000 or 10,000. It kind of makes things a little bit simpler in that respect. Also, it makes your playbook more generic, right? If I have just a group name in there, I'm not having to go and edit that playbook over and over. So really good feature there. Limiting. So limiting is something that is available on CLI and Ascender as well. And what it really lets you do is further restrict down the host you're going to operate against, right? So inventory, big list of all my hosts. Host section, it's going to narrow that down. So say I did it on the web group, right? The host section just says web and it's a group. Well, on the CLI or in Ascender, there's an extra option called limit. And so if I fill something in the limit field, it will further narrow down the results from the host section, right? Now, this can offer us a lot of efficiencies. It's actually really cool how you can kind of pull these together, because in my playbook, if I want to, I can just have the host section set to all, and all is an implicit group that exists for every inventory, and every host that's in that inventory automatically exists in the all, right? So I could just set the host section in my playbook to be all, which means it could theoretically run against everything, right? But I will use the limit section to be more specific. That way, I truly never have to touch my playbook to adjust that host portion, right? Because I'm using the limit option. But this could be dangerous, and I'm sure you can imagine why. So I almost never want an automation to run against everything inside of my inventory, because it could break tons of stuff, right? So to me, that's always been a little bit scary. Well, there are some ways around it. Now let me show you a playbook example of that. So here is kind of a little generic test run playbook. Again, all of this stuff is always in my public Git repository, so you can come in here and play with this as you like. But this playbook has an initial task that guards against that exact problem, right? So if you take a look right here in the host section, I have it set to all. So theoretically, if I just ran it just like it is, it's going to operate against everything in there. So say, for example, I have this running and it's going to be removing an access list that protects connectivity to a switch, right? If I run it against all in my inventory, it could theoretically pull this off of my firewalls or my backbone routers or really important infrastructure, and it could break everything. Now, I've put in this playbook a safeguard against running all without using limits. So right here, I'm using an assert, and that is a module that basically says, hey, I assume this is true. If it's not, error out. So here I'm just saying, I assume that, and here's some magic variables in here. Ansible play hosts all, so it's going to find all of the hosts that have been matched, right, by the host section, and it's going to find the length of that object, and it's making sure that it's less than the group all. So really it's saying, hey, if the number of hosts you have in here is not less than what you have here, go ahead and fail out. If it is less than, go ahead and complete, right? And here I'm just doing a debug where I'm spitting out the inventory name. So let's actually see that in action and how we kind of use that with limits. So I've got a little job template here. I just named AAA test, and this one is plain, right? So it doesn't have anything in there. I'm looking at the limit option. There's nothing specified in there, so I'm going to go ahead and launch it. Now this should run and then fail. Let's see. All right, exactly as expected, right? It failed out our job and it can't complete. And so this would protect us in the event that somebody tried to run this and forgot to use the limit option, right? So we're protected. It's not going to run against all. So how do we kind of work around this? I can go to details of this job, right? Because whenever I run a piece of automation, it automatically pops me into the job section. If I click on details, there's the job template name, right? Just kind of a little quick, instead of having to go into templates and everywhere else, I can click edit there. So now I have, this is the inventory I'm actually running against. I've only got 2 hosts in there. I'm going to copy the name of one of them really quick. So I could, in theory, I could paste this right here and I could click save and then launch. And so now I'm running it against a single host and it should successfully complete. Let's see. Excellent. As expected, all assertions passed and then it moves right on through. But that's a little bit more rigid. What if I want to make this slightly more flexible? I can do that. So I'm going to go back to details, click on AA test. I'm going to edit this job template. We have the option to prompt on launch, and you have this on many things, right? If you kind of look around, you'll see prompt on launch in a lot of different areas. And really what that means is if I launch this piece of automation, it's going to have a pop-up box that says, hey, fill in the blank here. And so I've got this entry. I'm going to go ahead and leave that in there, right? So theoretically, I could have a group name in here or a couple of hosts in there. And now those are going to become my default options, though I can override them. So I'm going to go ahead and click save. I'm going to click launch again. You can see it pops up and it's asking me for a limit option here. So since I already had something in there, that becomes the default. So if there's a default group that I want it to be in there, it will always pop up in there and ready to go, but I can augment if I want to. Now, for example, I've got the limit option in here and I can still blank it out and I can run it with nothing in there. What's going to happen if I launch it with limit, even on prompt on launch, set to blank? Exactly as expected. As you see here, right, there was nothing in the limit, so our first assertion task caught it and failed it. So this actually can protect you. So great efficiencies. I never have to touch my playbook because I've got the group all. I'm only having to modify my job template here. If I'm doing prompt on launch, I don't even have to modify it. I just prompt it on launch. I see the pop-up box. I fill it in. Bob's your uncle. We're done. So I think this is kind of a nice way to augment your playbooks, make things a little bit more efficient. If you have any questions or comments, or you would tweak or tune this to your specific environment, please feel free to reach out to us. I'd love to hear from you. If nothing else, happy ascending, happy automating, happy hosting, happy limiting, and we'll see you next time. Bye.